Bookshop is amazing. She's really, your whole culture is about supporting artists. And I'm a real bookstore person, so I really appreciate what you do here. It's super exciting to be here. So thanks for coming. I thought I'd start by telling you a little bit about the book, and then I'll read a little bit from the book, and then maybe tell you how the book came to be. And then we can do Q&A, because this is my first event where I've not been in conversation with someone. So we are going to be in conversation, like I said. So Lord in the Limelight is about 3 12-year-old kids in the year that they go on point, which for a ballet dancer, that means the year that their teacher decides they're strong enough to actually get a pair of pointe shoes and begin training to dance on point, which is a lot harder than it looks. And the 3 kids live on Mercer Island, Washington, which is actually where I'm from, and, well, not originally, but where I live now. And it is, that's the year they go on point, and they also audition for the Pacific Northwest Ballet School, which is probably the largest ballet school in that region, and also where I have been on the faculty for the last 12 years. So it's a place very near and dear to my heart also. The 3 kids that you'll meet in this book are Lauren, obviously. And Lauren has lived on Mercer Island her whole life. Ballet has come easy to her. It's something she sort of takes for granted and does with her friends. And then the first day of 6th grade, there's a new girl in class, and that's Serena. And Serena's mom was a ballerina, and she's just moved from the East Coast. She has a bit of a troubled home life, but she's very, very good at ballet. And Lauren, for once, is not the best in her class. And then the third point of view, so the book is told from each of these characters' point of view. The third point of view is their friend Brian, who is a Black boy who wants to dance on point, much to his father's disappointment. So, and really the book has a lot of things, but one of them really is friendship. And it's how these kids sort of learn from each other and what they take both from their relationships with each other and through learning ballet. That helps them kind of find out who they are and who they want to be in the world. So the section I'm going to read is after Lauren has a little injury at the beginning. I shouldn't say it's little, she sprains her ankle. But when she comes back to class, it's not exactly what she expected. So that was the scene I was going to read. Okay. So this is in Lauren's voice. The different chapters are in different voices, but okay. After the grand reverence and the applause at the end of class, I waited until the other girls left the studio. When the room was empty, I approached Miss Evangeline with an apologetic look. That didn't go so well. She nodded. You have work to do. I know. Her face was severe. You can come on Wednesdays and Fridays and take the lower class. I felt sick absorbing the difference between saying I would work hard and doing it. 5 days a week was a lot. She studied my face. It's up to you. I took a deep breath and nodded. We can't afford it, Dad said through clenched teeth when I asked about the extra classes. The next day after I told Ms. Evangeline, she said she'd call my parents. At bedtime, my mom told me they'd worked it out. During the first week of daily class, I hoped Ms. Evangeline would praise my hard work. I waited and waited for a compliment. She said nothing. I noticed the encouragement she heaped on the other students, and even though she said little to me, she did watch closely as I pushed through her most challenging combinations. Nothing was exciting about my extra time with the lower level classes. I went through the paces every day, working on the placement of my fingers, the speed of my tendus, and the angle of my head. Instead of correcting me in words, Ms. Evangeline often tapped on my raised shoulder or swayed back. There was one thing that changed. Miss Evangeline was friendly to all the parents and students, but most of the time she acted with a professional distance that kept her boundaries firmly in place. The harder I worked, the more energy she invested in me, especially when she started harping on me for small things like a sloppy fifth position. One day it just came to me what she was doing. She wasn't angry with me. It didn't matter to her that I'd taken a few months off. She focused on me the same way my mom grew her seedlings for our garden, carefully watering, fertilizing, and maintaining the proper conditions to make a plant flourish. Once I understood Miss Evangeline's intentions, I found every possible excuse to dance, whether down the hallway at my house or until closing time at the studio, when Miss Evangeline turned the lights out and told me to go home. So that's just a little excerpt from the book. And I guess I'll talk about how this book came to be. It starts about 25 years ago. So my background, hello, are you two dancers by any chance?
I like used to dance when I was like really
Did you?
little, but I don't.
Glad you're here. So I danced professionally with Miami City Ballet. I grew up in Salt Lake City and I danced with Ballet West there as a student. And then I went to New York and trained at the School of American Ballet in New York. And then I danced with Miami City Ballet, and then I went back to college. And when I went back to college after my career, one way that I tried to sort of reconcile leaving such an intense art form was I wrote about it. And I had it in my head that I was going to write a novel about my ballet experience. And I went to New York after I graduated and worked in book publishing. And during that time, we tried to sell those early novels to publishing houses. And that was at the time that Twilight was big. So there were no vampires in my book. They were also, I would say, pretty amateur. They were, I mean, I was in my 20s. I didn't really understand the craft of fiction. Nobody fully understands it, but I hadn't really studied it. They were just kind of from my heart, what I felt at the time. And so after those books didn't sell, I put them in a drawer and I put them away for 10 years. And then when I got engaged, my now husband pulled them out of a drawer and he said, why don't we just publish these ourselves? And it was, I had come to Seattle to work on the Amazon Books team. So I've worked on a lot of books. I've worked in editorial and publishing houses and bookstores. And at the time that I was on the Amazon Books team was when CreateSpace came about, which is the self-publishing platform. It was their first one. And so it was very natural for me to do that. But I think, and this is something I like to speak about in bookstores, especially if anyone is interested in writing themselves, is that at the time there was a very big stigma around self-publishing. There was this feeling that you weren't anointed, you weren't, it was vanity press. So I had a lot of trouble going from very traditional publishing to the idea of publishing myself. But we did, and we did it in a very kind of amateur way. We did the covers at home. The books weren't edited by me. They were not designed, but we published them. And there wasn't a lot of social media at the time. There was Facebook. And I put them on Facebook. And because I worked and studied in so many places in dance, we went out to sell almost 10,000 copies of that book, which is more than a lot of traditionally published books. It was sort of shocking. I mean, that was over several years, but anyway, I had kind of moved on after that. I thought, okay, I saw the books through. I got married, I had 4 kids. So I left corporate work and I was working at Island Books, which is my local indie bookstore. I hosted their monthly book club for almost 10 years and did all their online stuff and blogged, and also went back to teaching ballet. And during the pandemic, I started writing fiction again. And for a long time, I was writing adult fiction. That's sort of my long other thing that I do. But after one of those novels kind of ended up in a drawer again, I thought, well, I'll just write another ballet novel because I know I missed that earlier age. Because the other 2 books, the protagonist is like 16 to 18, and then she's like 18 to 22, like her first years in a ballet company. So I thought, well, I'll just write about the year they go on point, because that's kind of a big deal for kids, especially because my oldest kids are 11 now. So, I have 4 kids and they are all ballet students at Pacific Northwest Ballet School. So we're kind of entering that territory as a mom and as a teacher. And I teach a whole variety of ages. So I see like these characters, I live and breathe them. So that's sort of, I found it very interesting to write about them. And when I originally wrote the book, I wrote it just from Lauren's perspective. And then had a very wise mentor, hi Richard Curtis, if you're watching, tell me to write it from 3 points of view. And so I went back and I rewrote and rewrote. And during that time, I also started querying agents for the book. And of course, it's COVID, so a lot of people left the industry. But I also kept hearing ballet is too niche. We don't know how to market a ballet book. And if you look on the shelf, you'll see picture books, ballet picture books. And then you'll see memoirs by famous dancers, or you'll see history of classical ballet or biographies. But you don't see a lot in this space for this age between 12, 22, middle grade, young adults. My first 2 books were young adults. This one is middle grade. And, you know, when you're trying to sell something to the publishing industry, you need lots of comp titles. You need to say, you know, all these vampire books sold really well, and my book is kind of like this vampire book, and this is why you should buy it. Well, there aren't a lot of, I mean, and for our tagline, we use ballet shoes, which is from the 1970s, I think. It's very, but that's, you know, one of the closest comps. The other thing that I knew when I was writing this book is that there are some books, there's been a few by other dancers, but the fact that I'm still in the ballet industry and still in that community so closely, I knew it would be different. Like my perspective on it was different. So, and I also reached this age and point in my career where I felt like we need to start talking about these kids and help them feel seen in a way that if the publishing industry is saying ballet is too niche, then most of the world is maybe saying ballet is too niche or not understood, or it has historically been somewhat exclusive. And this just, the more no I heard, the more it felt increasingly important that my students got this book. Nowhere else, at that point, you know, if no one else wanted my book, okay, that's all right. But my students at P&B and my kids, and I also sort of felt like, you know, I've been sort of trudging along trying to write these ballet novels for like 20-some years. I was like, I have to see it through. I just have to see it through. And my husband once again turned to me and said, I'm tired of people rejecting you. And so we decided that I would not reject myself anymore. And we founded our own press. And because of all my history in publishing, I kind of knew what to do. I knew all the hats. And so we started Rhododendron Press, and I hired out a team, and we invested in it like a business. So it's my own, I feel like I'm an entrepreneur hour, which is one of the reasons I have so much admiration for Zibby, because she has just built this thing, which is unbelievable. And now we're on tour, and the book is out, and there's a backstory to the illustrations. That is a side, and if you look through, you'll see there's these beautiful, beautiful, very ballet aesthetic illustrations that I connected very early on when I started writing this with someone I had danced with in childhood in Salt Lake City. And we didn't know each other well, but she for years had done ballet art. That was her thing. And I saw some of her images online, and someone put us in touch, and I said, I just love your aesthetic. And she said, well, I would love to illustrate the book. And I thought, ballet, like, it's so visual. Of course this book should be illustrated. That was just a given. And so we both kind of did this as a passion project. Like, we kept hearing no, we didn't know if it was going to go anywhere. And we worked on it for years. And at one point, we have an old friend who was actually my Clara in the Nutcracker at Valley West when I was a kid, who owned a ballet school outside of Salt Lake. And she let Jill and I come to the school. Like, one crazy weekend, I flew to Salt Lake, and we went there, and she had her students actually act out the story. And so we picked out who was going to be Serena, who was going to be Brian, who was going to be Lauren, and then the kids all, and they were so into it. At which point then I was like, okay, I have to publish this book because they all think they're going to be in the book. But it was this magical day, and we took pictures of them, and then Jill started illustrating the pictures. And so that is, you know, in our grand vision, there were going to be hundreds of pictures, but, you know, life gets in the way, kids get in the way. So, so now there's a book, and now we are hitting the road. This is our first stop outside of Seattle. I guess it's me, myself, and I. Next week we'll be in New York. Then we'll be in Salt Lake City for 2 different trips. And the kids, some of them who were originally in the illustrations, are going to do some events with me, which will be super cool. And then finally we're in Palo Alto near my alma mater at Stanford, so I'll get to reconnect there with some people. But I've just been this has been such a nice community building project. It's put me back in touch with so many people from different parts of my life that have really meant a lot to me. It's also made it really clear what a special community the dance community is, and how much we all want to connect and be a part of something positive, and look at ballet in a more positive way, and look at the things that we've taken from it that were good, as opposed to, you know, a lot of the 5 that come out about ballet have been sort of on a more sort of negative look at or critical look at the industry, or, sort of the downsides of it. And I'm kind of a forward-thinking person rather than a backward-thinking person. I feel like a lot of those books raise issues. Who's left to solve these issues? Well, people, not me, because I'm a teacher, but administrative people higher than me, people who have the ability to do that. But I feel like if it doesn't start with me, who's it going to start with? So one thing I've really enjoyed about the conversations that I've had with this, and part of why I enjoy being in conversation with people at these events, is that it opens up a conversation about what role should ballet play in a kid's life. What are the good things that they can take away from it? And how can these kids feel seen as people and not just as dancers? So I've enjoyed that more than anything. I mean, I hope lots of people read the book. I hope people spread the word about the book. I hope it does really, really well. But I also just hope it kind of brings, especially the dance community together, where there still are a lot of negative feelings floating around. And I think like we need that to be better. So, yeah, that's kind of my book talk. Does anyone want to ask any questions or jump in? Yeah.
It's a very technical question, but it came to my mind when you were describing the book. Do boys have a different type of point shoe than girls?
That's such a good question. Okay, so the character of Brian, I could talk about it for a long time. So historically, boys did not dance on point at all.
Right.
If they did, it was with a particular company called the Trocaderos, and when they did that, it was very camp, right? They would sort of dress up in drag, and it was this campy thing. The short answer is no, they wear point shoes just like women, but I'm sure they need I'm guessing their shoes have to be wider. But one of the things that's really evolved, especially during COVID and especially at PNB, because PNB has been very forward thinking about diversity and inclusion, is we've had a few dancers come up there who their gender is fluid and they've decided that they want to dance on point, and our artistic director has encouraged that and supported that, and that's been kind of a new thing, and has valued the dancer rather than the individual, not just the typecast. That the dancers have been able to sort of dictate who they are, and it's coming from them as opposed to coming from the top down. And that's been like so inspiring to watch. And being on the faculty there and watching that, and even the conversations, about how are we going to include everyone? What is this all? How can we do things differently? I felt very inspired by that. And that character, the Brian character was one I was very afraid to write, especially, in today's climate. If you're not, I'm a white middle-aged mom. I'm not a 12-year-old black boy who wants to dance on point. So I already knew I would be criticized for taking on that character. But I really tried to do my research. It was very important to me to get this kid right, but it was also, and I had been told not to include, that I didn't have the right to include them. Brian is a him in here, but the more I thought about that, the more I thought, well, if I don't write this character, nobody's going to write this character, and they're never going to be in a book. And I wanted the book to somewhat reflect my utopian view of what the ballet world might be in the future, or what I would like it to be for kids. And so it just felt super important to include Brian. And I maybe stuck my neck out a little bit and tried really, really hard. I hope that readers will feel like I got him right. And yeah, so sorry, that totally went off the rails yes, they wear the same kind of point shoes. Although, historically also point shoes were all pink, no matter what color your skin was. And that's been a recent development too, that now, no matter what your skin color, you can find point shoes that match your skin. And we spent a lot of time on the details and the illustrations for that too. Jill and I had a lot of fun looking at the different color, even in paint. What paint should we use for Brian's skin? What paint should we use for the shoes to match the skin? I think that really speaks to that you could be whoever you are, you could be that authentic person in ballet, not in ballet, whatever. And the character Brian is not necessarily meant to represent, we have a dancer named Ashton Edwards in PNB, and some people have thought that Brian is a reflection of that. But to me, Brian is really a symbol for not letting the outside world decide who you are. And, even though all these forces are telling Brian you're one thing, Brian knows that he's something else. And through, I mean, all the characters kind of go from, they all have a trajectory in what they learn, but Brian's at the very end, especially like the end of his story, well, it's really the beginning, but he really learns to stand up for who he is inside and not just try to be something outside that the world expects of him. And that was really exciting to write. Yeah.
How do you find the process of self-publishing after being in the corporate world of that industry for so long?
Okay, that's a great question. You know, now I have to say it's kind of been awesome because I can call all the shots. I do think that there's a real liberation in waiting for other people to tell you you're good. And then when you say, well, I'm going to decide if I'm good, and I'll let the world decide, because who am I writing the book for? I'm not writing it for the publishing industry. I was writing it for readers. But I do feel like there was this big leap of courage. I think most writers start out wanting that affirmation. There's this fantasy you're going to get an agent and then they're going to sell your book to randoms. Well, those places are not the places they were even 10 years ago. There's a huge turnover in that industry, and there's so much less reading that happens. It's very corporate. It's very producing a product. I don't think anyone who writes to publish should be under the illusion that the world is waiting for their book. Like it became very clear to me, like no one is waiting for my book. Nobody's waiting for, I mean, maybe they're probably waiting for Lauren Groff's next book. Nobody's waiting for my book. So the only person who's waiting for it is me. And once I kind of came to terms with that and felt in my own self, like, that's okay. It was very empowering. And also, the more people told me we don't know how to market a ballet book, the more I thought, well, I know how to market a ballet book and I can. And so I would say it's been very empowering. I do think I spent 20 years of education to even be able to do it though. That I know that just being in the room, being a fly on the wall in everything from editorial meetings to Amazon meetings to bookstore events to all of these little things that I didn't realize I was doing, all built up to the same thing with the ballet stuff. So it's been this really interesting moment of, 45 isn't the end. It's the start of all of the research I've been doing for a very long time. And that's pretty cool. And it's also been really cool to show my kids. Because for a long time they would watch me writing and then, hoping for someone else to give me the fairy dust. And I was like, okay, no one's going to do it for me, so I'm going to do it. Anyway, that answers the question. Yeah. Anyone else?
Are you, so now you have like a publishing company, are you, again, sort of looking to emulate what you did, like, do you have like sort of niche genres that you are publishing under your umbrella?
So what's coming? But I love it. You're forward thinking like me. So, what's coming right now is actually in about a week or two, we are re-releasing my old books, and this time we're doing them right. So this was also.
I thought they were great. I read both of them within like 12 hours.
Oh my
And
God,
right now
that's
I'm
amazing.
single parenting, working full time and dancing full time, and I like inhaled them.
Okay.
So yeah.
Well, they're better now. They're going to be so
Finally
much better.
in.
But I love that. So that was actually a very interesting process to go back and look at them and not be a 20-year-old writer who was, pretty hurt and bitter about leaving my dance career and lost, and now be 45 and have that perspective. So they're revised now. They have a new introduction, and what's really cool is we have Sarah Gabriel Ryan, who was just promoted to principal a few days ago at P&B. Congratulations, Sarah. She's on the cover. And so she's going to be on the cover of both those books. I no longer have to be on the cover. And yeah, that's been a really, now that I was like, okay, now we know how to do this. So we reproduced those books in a way that they're packaged and they are at the professional level that I would want them like this. As far as bigger picture, my honest answer, and I was asked first, I have no idea. Nancy Pearl, who is a good friend of mine and who's a very famous Seattle librarian, suggested I go back and start republishing out of print dance books because there are a lot of them. But like I said, I'm a much more forward-thinking person, and I do feel it's my responsibility to support other artists. I try to do that, especially as a teacher, because that's what I do in the classroom. And because it's meant so much to me when I was coming up, so many people tell you no, so many people dismiss you. So when somebody who is ahead of you says, "Here's my hand, let me help you," like that can mean everything to someone younger. So that feels very, very important to me, to support other writers, support dancers, other aspiring publishers. I was very inspired by Zibby because I could see her doing that, right? I mean, I'm not even, but I don't think when Zibby started, she probably didn't know I'm not Zibby, and I don't intend to be. I actually, to be honest, I truly, truly want to write. I have a novel I've been working on for about a year. It's adult fiction. I'd like to write more adult fiction. I don't know that I want to publish it or not. I feel like I now have I have a lot of jobs going right now. And I'm teaching and I'm momming and I'm publishing and right now I'm in the marketing publicity book tour stage. So you asked me like in February. That was a long answer. But if you have ideas, let me know. Okay, I'm open. I figure life kind of pushes you where you. It's a good question. Yes.
How has building these characters kind of helped you connect that bridge to teaching, essentially? Like, what do you learn, or what has taught you now into going into teaching, back into it, and so on?
Like, has it made me a better teacher?
Potentially, yeah. Or maybe eye-opening also because of, you have kids that are now reaching that same age.
Right. That's a great question. I think so many times we're in there teaching and the students are going and in and out, and we have a lot of students, and this made me slow down and think about who they are outside of the studio, which as my kids have come up in the school, when you're driving the carpool, you hear a lot in the car. You hear, from a different perspective than what you see in the studio. You hear the kids say, the teacher gave me a look that made me feel like I did really badly today. And then you go, okay, I really have to be very conscious of any little thing, because kids are very sensitive and they're also get it. Like, they're very smart. So I would say it made me think harder about my students, made me think harder about my kids. I love teaching because I feel like I'm the learner all the time. All of these processes, the teaching, the writing, the thinking about others, in general, cultivates sort of a feeling of generosity, of wanting to, you don't think about yourself. One of the reasons I love to read is because it makes you kind of put on different hats and think about other people. And I just really enjoy that. So, if anything, just deepen my appreciation for my students and also my sense of responsibility. That would be the answer. I think it deepened my sense of being now, and especially having grown and have had the journey that I've had. It's been a real turning point to be like, well, it's not somebody else's responsibility to come to the table or to reach out and bring people in, or it's like, if not me, who? I think it's made me kind of put on my big girl pants. A lot of it. I don't know. We'll see. I hope. Anyway. Well, thank you guys so much for coming. It really meant a lot to me. It was super special to be here and see you guys. And I'm happy to sign your books. I'd love to sign your books. So thanks for having me, guys.